In 1948, the American auto industry was a fortress ruled by the Big Three: Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. But seemingly out of nowhere, a new name appeared, one that sent shockwaves through Detroit: Tucker. Nicknamed the Torpedo, the Tucker 48 looked like it had rolled straight out of the future. It had a center headlight that turned with the steering, a windshield designed to pop out in a crash, a safe-to-focus crash-absorbing chassis, and a radical aircraft-derived engine. This wasn't just another car, it was a direct challenge to the status quo. The industry wasn't used to outsiders, and certainly not outsiders this bold. Tucker promised a car that was safer, faster, and more advanced than anything the giants were offering. But what Detroit saw as innovation, they also saw as dangerous. Preston Tucker wasn't your typical car executive. He was an eccentric dreamer, part engineer, part salesman, and completely unwilling to accept the stale post-war designs Detroit was churning out. He had already worked with Ford, designed armored vehicles, and even dabbled in aircraft development during World War II. But after the war, when Americans expected progress, Tucker saw an industry stuck in the past, cars that were unsafe, uninspired, and decades behind in technology. So in 1946, Tucker announced something outrageous. He would build an entirely new kind of car, a vehicle that prioritized safety, performance, and forward-thinking design. He didn't just want to sell transportation, he wanted to build a symbol of innovation and modern America. To do it, he leased a massive former aircraft engine plant in Chicago, a sprawling 5 million square foot complex. Tucker wasn't just starting a car company, he was declaring war on complacency. And he called his creation the Tucker 48. The public quickly gave it a more thrilling name: the Tucker Torpedo, a nickname that captured its speed, sleekness, and sense of disruption. The over-engineered heart, the LT1 V8. Beneath the Corvette ZR1's sculpted hood lay its most audacious feature, the LT1 small block V8. This wasn't just a tuned-up engine. It was a hand-built, solid-lifter masterpiece pushing 370 horsepower out of just 350 cubic inches. For the early 70s, that was outrageous, especially when emissions regulations were looming like storm clouds over Detroit. The LT1 revved like a race motor, with a snarling exhaust note and a brutally sharp throttle response that caught even seasoned drivers off guard. Chevrolet's engineers obsessed over every detail: forged pistons, high-flow cylinder heads, a hot mechanical cam, and an 11.0 to 1 compression ratio, numbers that made rival pony cars nervous. This engine wasn't built for smooth cruising. It was built to hunt at high RPM, giving the ZR1 an edge that felt more European than American. But this brilliance came at a cost. The LT1 demanded meticulous tuning and premium high-octane fuel. Owners who treated it like a normal Corvette often paid the price in blown head gaskets or warped valves. It was over-engineering at its most thrilling and its most unforgiving. A chassis that fought back. While the LT1 engine grabbed headlines, the ZR1 package quietly reworked the Corvette's entire backbone. Chevy's engineers didn't just want raw speed. They wanted control, and that meant transforming the car's handling from boulevard cruiser to track predator. Heavy-duty springs and shocks replaced the soft, road-friendly setup found on regular Corvettes. The ZR1 got beefier anti-roll bars, stiffer bushings, and quick ratio steering, making it razor-sharp in corners but brutally unforgiving on rough pavement. Every bump shot through the driver's spine like an electric jolt, and long drives felt more like endurance events than joyrides. Even the brakes were a race-bred, J56 heavy-duty ventilated discs with special linings that resisted fade during high-speed punishment. It was a setup designed to survive road racing, not Sunday drives, and it showed. The result was a Corvette that could outdance European exotics but punished anyone who underestimated it. In an era when muscle cars were built for straight-line sprints, the ZR1 dared to carve corners, and it made sure you knew who was in charge. Stripped down to go fast. What made the ZR1 even more extreme was what it didn't have. To keep weight down and performance up, Chevrolet deliberately stripped away anything that hinted at comfort or luxury. Air conditioning? Gone. Power windows? Deleted. Radio? Optional at best. And most ZR1s left the factory without one. Even sound-deadening materials were reduced to a bare minimum, making the cabin a roaring echo chamber for the LT1's mechanical fury. This brutal minimalism wasn't an accident. It was a statement. The ZR1 wasn't built for cruising down Main Street with the top down. It was built to dominate road courses and punish competitors. Everything that didn't make it faster was cut out, even if it made the car less livable. Owning one meant sacrificing daily comfort for raw, unfiltered performance. And for the few who could handle that trade-off, the payoff was a Corvette that felt like a street-legal race car, because in many ways, it was a ghost on the sales floor. For all its brilliance, the ZR1 was practically invisible to the public. Chevrolet never advertised it, never splashed it across magazine covers, and never parked it proudly in dealer showrooms. To get one, you had to know it existed, and then quietly check off the secret ZR1 box buried deep on the order sheet. This secrecy wasn't marketing negligence, it was intentional. The ZR1 wasn't meant for casual buyers or weekend cruisers. It was aimed at serious racers who needed a factory-built weapon they could take straight to the track. Chevy didn't want warranty claims from owners shocked that their new Corvette rode like a brick and needed constant tuning. As a result, only a tiny handful were ever sold, just 53 in 1970. They slipped quietly off the assembly line, scattered across the country like whispered legends. Even many Chevrolet dealers never saw one in person. That scarcity turned the ZR1 into something mythic almost immediately, a phantom Corvette that existed more in rumor than reality, yet was faster and sharper than anything else Chevy offered. The sudden death of a legend. Just as the ZR1 was beginning to make its presence felt on racetracks, the world around it shifted. Fast. By 1971, unleaded fuel mandates and stricter emissions regulations were slamming the brakes on Detroit's horsepower wars. The LT1's sky-high compression ratio suddenly became a liability, and new rules forced Chevrolet to dial back the ZR1's wild personality. Horsepower ratings plunged. The once feral LT1 was detuned, losing its sharp edge, and by 1972, the ZR1 package was quietly fading from existence. Insurance companies had also turned against high-performance cars, slapping punishing premiums on anything remotely fast, making it even harder to sell. Within just a couple of years, the ZR1 went from cutting-edge predator to endangered species. The muscle car era was collapsing, and the ZR1 became one of its first casualties. What had been designed as a road racing killer simply arrived at the wrong moment in history, too wild for a world suddenly obsessed with safety, economy, and emissions. The rare legacy that refused to die. Although the ZR1 vanished from order sheets by 1972, it never truly disappeared. Fewer than 60 examples were ever built, making it one of the rarest Corvettes ever to leave the factory. Most were bought by hardcore racers, and many were pushed to their absolute limits on track, meaning few survived untouched. Collectors began whispering about them in hushed tones, calling them the ghost Corvettes because almost no one had ever seen one in the flesh. Their rarity only amplified their mystique. Even today, stumbling upon a genuine ZR1 is like finding buried treasure, a fleeting reminder of a time when Chevrolet briefly unleashed a no-compromise race car on public roads. And while the badge would later return in the late 80s and again in the 2000s, the original ZR1's spirit still stands apart. It wasn't about luxury or top-speed bragging rights. It was pure racing obsession distilled into fiberglass and steel. A short-lived outlaw, yet one that carved a legend too fierce to fade. The early 70s Corvette ZR1 wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It proved that Chevrolet could build a machine purely for racers, even if that meant most buyers would never understand it. It arrived like a lightning strike, burned bright, and vanished almost overnight, leaving only whispers and legends behind. In a way, its failure was also its triumph. The ZR1 dared to exist in a time when the world was changing too fast for it to survive. And that's exactly what makes it unforgettable, a rare glimpse of what happens when engineers are unleashed to chase performance at any cost. Even now, more than 50 years later, the ZR1 still feels untamed. Not because of how many were built, but because of how few dared to dream it could exist at all.